Hello and welcome to San Francisco Interactive Design and Development. Thank you guys for coming out tonight, sharing your time with us. I want to introduce to you Pongpaet. He's going to be talking tonight about lessons learned in launching Instagram in 2 days. So big welcome for Peck. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. I wanted to thank Trulia for hosting, and thank you, Wonderland Group, for sponsoring. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time this evening, for listening to me blab about something I created almost a year ago. So a little bit about me. My name is Pongpaet. I'm Pongpaet on Twitter. And I have a design company called Impeccable. We do product design, UI, UX, kind of the works. Anyone recognize this guy? Anyone? Raiden. Okay, so a little bit personal life info about me that's kind of interesting. I used to do motion capture, which is the process where they digitize people's moves for the aforementioned video game Mortal Kombat. I did that for 6 video games over the span of 11 years. Totally unrelated to, that's like my day job. So, yeah, I did if you're familiar with Reddit, I did an I am a type thing on, like, I was Raiden. So who here has heard of Pinstagram? Anyone? Like 1, 2. Oh, cool, very cool. Awesome, yay. So Pinstagram, I'll tell you the origin story. So Pinstagram was created, basically Pinterest plus Instagram, and it was made over a course of 2 days, and it kind of looks like this. Basically, lets you view your Instagram photos on the web. At the time, there wasn't that many products. Like Instagram still didn't have like any significant web presence. Like you can view one photo at a time. You didn't have access to your feed, and you didn't. There were a bunch of third-party apps on the web, but they weren't very good, and so I was an avid Instagram user at the time, and I saw nothing out there that I really wanted to use, so that was one of the inceptions of the idea. Actually, I'll tell you the origin story. A friend, my business partner at the time, and we were pitching VCs our startup, and it was just so depressing. They all hated our idea. I felt like a leper. Like nobody wanted to touch us, with a 10-foot pole on our idea. So, one Friday afternoon after a VC meeting, I said, "Man, this really sucks. They're all turning us down." So I said, "What's a pitch that nobody's ever going to say no to?" And at the time, Pinterest was like this hot company that everybody loved, and Instagram was just acquired Facebook announced the $1 billion acquisition. So I said, well, if we mashed up Pinterest plus Instagram, that's going to be like the most awesome company, because that's what VCs are in love with right now. So that started as a joke, and then I thought to myself, well, I'm an Instagram user, and like Instagram on the web kind of sucks, so that might actually be a good idea. So that's how it started. So like that Friday afternoon, like I started, like the seed of the idea started germinating, and I immediately went back home and started working on the design and front end, because that's what I do. And then by Saturday morning, I had like a working prototype of just the popular feed. Like, so imagine this with just the popular photos, and I showed it to my business partner Brandon and said, "Hey, check this out." And he looked at it. It was like, "Wow, this is awesome. Let's do this." So after that, I kind of like, by that time the design was done. I didn't even touch it. I just like gave him the design and front end, and he coded the back end. And then by Sunday afternoon or evening, he had the like the login working, and you could see your own feed. Pretty much, basically what we shipped. So that was the origin story. And we've since served over 200 million images, Instagram images. We've been featured in Wired, Forbes, Mashable, Fast Company. We've been interviewed on TV a couple times. As really just kind of a whirlwind. What was funny was like we weren't even serious. This was not like, our main company just wasn't doing well at all, and then we kind of came up with this idea, and then like people kind of just focused on this idea, which I thought it was really funny. Yeah, so the other interesting thing was like we had mixed panel analytics. We maxed the free plan out in like 10 hours. It was really interesting. We had like, almost immediately we had like, 3,000 users. 3,000 users became 8,000 users, and it just kind of get snowballing from there. So a month later after that, we launched. We came out with the iPad app, and that did really well too. Within 12 hours, we were the top 20 in the App Store in photography and video. And then in 24 hours, we were in the top 10. We were like 7 and 8 or so. And today, I kind of like to share the lessons learned. So one thing to kind of keep in mind is most people cannot envision your product. What do I mean by that? So I initially when I first had the idea, I talked to somebody else. I tried to describe to them the idea, and they're like, okay, but I like the Instagram on the iPhone is good enough. Like what, why would I need this? But then, so you get frustrated, like why can't you understand my cool idea? And then after I showed them this, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. It's cool. It's useful. So the lesson learned there is like you can pitch somebody something, but unless they can see it and touch it, in some sort of way, whether it's even just a Photoshop mock-up, it's hard for people to envision what you have envisioned in your own mind. The other thing you learned is like nobody cares about your stupid idea. They really don't. I mean, if you think about in terms of your own self when a new product or idea, launched, like how much do you care about it? You don't, because there's so many things coming out. Your brain only cares about the things you care about, right? Like the things you've already have a relationship with, products that you're familiar with, like, like your Apple product or your, it might be your phone or, like a clothing brand you associate with. But some new thing that just came out, most likely you don't care about it because you don't have any prior relationship with it. So nobody's going to care about what you launch. So the takeaway from that is, if you want to kind of get it to take off, my analogy is you be like a remora. You're this little fish, and you kind of attach yourself to like the bigger things. So like in this case, we attached ourselves to two big things, Pinterest and Instagram. The other lesson learned was timing. So I think it's running. The idea I was trying to convey is like the picture was captured at the right moment where this cat was running and its legs disappeared, and it just kind of became a meme. But one thing that I've learned in this whole thing was like timing was absolutely, I think, a crucial factor in the success of the Pinstagram. At the time, just a month prior, so we launched it in May sometime, end of May or early July. Right before, Facebook just acquired Instagram, TechCrunch, all these sites, Mashable covered it. NPR, everybody covered the news that Instagram, this young company of 13 employees, less than a year old, got acquired for $1 billion. So they didn't care so much about Pinstagram, they just cared about Instagram. They just wanted Instagram news. They wanted to write about Instagram, anything Instagram related. They're like, give me more Instagram. So they were just writing everything about Instagram, and we just happened to be there at the right time. They're like, hey, here's more Instagram news you can write about. So that takes me to the press. Like one of the things that other entrepreneurs ask me about all the time is like, oh, you got all this press. How do you get all this press? So I just covered some of the things, which was timing, attaching yourself to the big brands because nobody cares about your brand. And the other thing is, takeaway for me was make it really easy for the press to cover you. What do I mean by that? Make it as easy as pushing a button. I don't know if anyone's actually read the first few kind of coverage articles on Pinstagram. They all pretty much read the same, and it was because I wrote the post. I sent them the screenshot. Everybody pretty much had the same screenshots, had the same content because I sent them all a press kit, and all they had to do was tweak some stuff and hit publish. So you basically making, if you have a new product and you're like, oh, here's, you write to TechCrunch and it's like, oh, and log in, create an account, and upload some photos. Like nobody's gonna do that. They don't have time. They're being pitched like hundreds of stories a day. You send them this thing where they can just hit a button to publish, and that's how you increase your likelihood of getting covered. And the other takeaway is having a good story. What do I mean by that? Having a good story that's, like makes it for a really nice headline, makes it tweetable, easy to share, easy to understand. Our story that we had was, we had two friends who, merged two brands together over 2 days, and equals one great story. It was like something that people could really put their heads around. It was like, if you read the articles, like that was kind of the message that was the story that was being covered. Like, oh, two guys, 2 days, two brands. It made for a good story. So definitely have a good story. Distribution. What do we mean by that? So a lot of companies or products, when they launch new products, it's like, okay, you launched it, you put it in the App Store, nothing happens, falls flat. And what I tell a lot of my clients too is, they have this great idea, and we're product guys, we can build you a great product, but do you have a marketing strategy? Do you have a distribution strategy? And my response is, if you don't, you should cut your budget in half and spend half of it on marketing. Because a lot of people don't, that's not, products don't sell themselves, they don't market themselves. You have to think about that. And so we thought about that very early on. So when we first launched Pinstagram, and we knew right away we were going to have an iPad app. So, but we didn't have one yet. So we had a little form. Hey, if you want the iPad app, give us your email. We got 6,000 emails. So by the time a month later, when we launched the iPad app, we were able to blast everyone and get a ton of downloads right away. Because if you launch with no plan, there's almost 1 million apps in the App Store now. No distribution strategy, no plan. It's to me, you might as well buy a lottery ticket, because there's so many apps out there, even more apps on the Android App Store. So that's what we want to do is build a list. Start building a list as early as possible, and that's what we did. We built it as soon as we launched the web version, and we used something we used Mailchimp, and because we had a really high open rate for our email. That was another takeaway. Mailchimp gives you analytics. So, for example, you as a company can tell Mailchimp, this is your industry, this is what you're sending, and our stats were telling us we had double the industry open rate, and that was because people wanted the product. They had self-subscribed to the list because they're already interested in the product, and so when the product came out, they wanted to be the first ones to download it. Another thing we learned was measure everything. That's something I highly recommend. We used Mixpanel early on, because that was previously I used Mixpanel at another company. It was really cool, and but we didn't anticipate so much usage that we would max it out. We eventually swapped to Google Analytics, but we tracked everything, every click. You click a like button, comment, you follow someone. I can tell you how many. I can tell you, for example, that people peruse at say 100 more times than people comment on something. There's 100 more page views per comments. There's 10 times more likes than there are comments, and you map that out. It's kind of low. Maps to friction. How much friction takes more effort to comment, takes less effort to like. Takes no effort to kind of just browse. We measured everything, and one of the cool things we learned was, for example, 70% of the people use portrait mode on the iPad version. That was interesting because I don't use portrait mode, and for the longest time, the iPad version didn't have portrait mode because I always used it in landscape mode, because I kind of built it for myself, and some people were asking for portrait mode. Eventually, we did launch portrait mode, but the features weren't the same. Features in portrait mode were a bit behind. So for example, you couldn't, if you turned around in portrait mode, you couldn't enter comments, but you can if you're in landscape mode. So I'd get support questions oh, how do you enter in comments? I'm like, what's wrong with you? There's a comment field. Just enter in the comments. But when you turn it around, we just haven't implemented it in portrait mode, and some people had never used it in landscape mode. They'd never discovered that you can rotate it and see a different view. So once you have analytics, you can understand user behavior. Is what the point is. Internationalize is another point. I think one of the key success factors, I think, of the iPad version is, we looked at the data on the web, and most of our traffic, for example, came from like Brazil, Portugal, France, Italy, Thailand, Indonesia. So those were our top countries. So we decided early on when we were going to launch the iPad version, we said we're going to internationalize, at least have like product descriptions and just text for those countries, because those were our top countries for the web. So when we first launched, I didn't use any service. I just like found my Facebook friends who knew Portuguese and Italian, Indonesian, and like, hey, I got this awesome product. Could you help me translate, some stuff here? And so I reached out to my friends, and then when we launched, we had, besides the U.S. market, we launched in other markets, but we had, the text description and everything was kind of in their language. And if you think about it, if you would have an app that you want to download, you don't know anything about, and you can't even figure out what it's about, you're most likely not going to download it. So by understanding that, okay, these markets are already hot, let's just make sure that there's no friction, right? There's no excuse that they won't download it. Another lesson we learned, this is all based on the measure everything, like understanding data, telling people what to do. That's one thing we learned. So in the product, we wanted people to connect their social accounts. That's valuable, as a business for the company, because that's part of our distribution strategy, and we get more information from the user. And we had when we first launched, the way to connect social. Well, when we first launched, we didn't even have Connect Social. We just had a bare bones product. Eventually, we launched like all these social connections. But it was buried in the profile. You had to go, on the top right, click on the profile. There was a drop down, and then you had to click Social Connect, Facebook, Connect, Twitter. Like maybe 0.3% of the people did that. I mean, if you wonder, it seems like kind of common sense that not many people do it, because you buried it in a menu, and you have to, people have to, if they wanted to do it, they had to look for it. They had to search for it. So what we did was we did an experiment. We just had Social Connect pop-ups. So right after you log in, you're in Instagram, and then the first thing you see if you've never logged in before is, hey, connect your Facebook, connect your Twitter. And we saw, it went from 0.3% to 30% social connects. So that was really amazing, just by telling people, instead of like, hey, you can do this if you find it, just telling them, hey, connect your social, connect your Twitter. People do it, or at least a good number of people do. The other key thing I learned was don't be afraid to kill features. What do I mean by that? When we first launched, I thought it would be great for me to have like my finger on the pulse of the users. So we installed this support tool called Involve, which is a chat tool that you can, with a line of JavaScript code, you can embed on your website, and you can hook it up to like an IM client. So whenever somebody's online, a user, they see that I'm online, they can IM me, and it's like instant chat. Users could get access to me to tell me, hey, my, this thing is not working and stuff. And what was happening was I would find that people would chat me up for no other reason than they were bored. Like they didn't even have a problem. They're like, hi, hello, and then they would, like, is anyone there? And I was like, hey, I'm here. And they'd always be very surprised, slightly delighted that it was like the guy who created it was on here supporting instead of like some tech support or whatever. And some people were just bored out of their minds, and they just want somebody to entertain them. And like I think I had like one chat thing where it went for at least 2 hours. And I thought to myself, why am I doing this? This is a waste of time. And but I thought, I shouldn't be the one wasting my time. These people, there's a lot of bored people. They should be talking to each other. So I launched a feature where anyone on the site could talk to any other one else on the site. And, we just used a tool. I forget what it was, but we used a widget that kind of did that. And, what it was kind of cool at first, but what I saw was people didn't really talk to each other. People kind of just spammed each other. Like, they just wanted more followers. People wanted people to like their photo and comment on their photo or follow them. It was just really spammy, and that was not an experience I wanted for new users. If you come in and you get spammed with, hey, follow me, like my photo, like my profile, that's not the user experience I wanted. So in 2 days, after observing this behavior, I killed that feature. So the takeaway is, don't be afraid to kill features if it's not working. And lastly, if you have a good idea, or you think you have a good idea, just do it. The takeaway here, the big overall takeaway, is just to do it. Don't hesitate. Don't wait for anyone's approval. If you think of like I mentioned earlier, I pitched it to somebody else, told them the idea. They didn't get it, and then when I did show it to them, they got it and they liked the idea. So if you feel like you want to do something, just do it.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for having me.